relaxations to NRI. When non-resident Indians return to India, they have issues with respect to their accrued retirement accounts. This is usually due to mismatch in taxation period. They also face difficulties in getting credit for Indian taxes in foreign jurisdictions. I propose to notify rules for removing their hardship of double taxation. Exemption from audit. Currently, if your turnover exceeds 1 crore, you have to get your accounts audited. In February 2020 budget, I had increased the limit for tax audit to 5 crores for those who carry out 95% of their transactions digitally. To further incentivize digital transactions and to reduce compliance burden, I propose to increase this limit for tax audit for such persons from. In the previous budget, I had abolished the dividend distribution tax. Investment. Dividend was made taxable in the hands of shareholders. Now, in order to provide ease of compliance, I propose to make dividend payment to rate and InvIT exempt from TDS. Further, as the amount of dividend income cannot be estimated correctly by the shareholders for paying advance tax, I propose to provide that advance tax liability on dividend income shall arise only after the declaration or payment of dividend. Also, for the foreign portfolio investors, I propose to enable deduction of tax on dividend income at lower treaty rate. Attracting foreign investment into infrastructure sector. In the last budget, for attracting foreign investment in the infrastructure sector, we had granted 100% tax exemption, subject to certain conditions, to foreign sovereign wealth funds and pensions. We have noticed that few of such funds are facing difficulties in meeting to relax some of these conditions related to prohibition on private funding, restriction on commercial activities, and direct investment in infrastructure. In order to allow funding of infrastructure by issue of zero-coupon bonds, I propose to make notified infrastructure debt funds eligible to raise funds by issuing tax-efficient zero-coupon bonds. Affordable housing. Affordable housing and rental housing. This government sees housing for all and affordable housing as priority areas. In July 2019 budget, I provided an additional deduction of interest amounting to 1.5 lakh for loan taken to purchase an affordable house. I propose to extend the eligibility of this condition by 1 more year to 31st March 2022. The additional deduction of 1.5 lakh shall therefore be available for loans taken up to 31st March 2022 for the purchase of affordable houses. Further, to keep up the supply of affordable houses, I propose projects can avail a tax holiday for 1 more year till 31st March 2022. These are available now for projects also. We are committed to promote supply of affordable rental housing for migrant workers. For this, I propose to allow tax exemption for notified affordable rental housing projects. Tax incentives to IFSC. Of this speech, the government is committed to making the International Financial Services Center in GIFT City a global financial incentives already provided. I propose to include, among others, tax holiday for capital gains, for aircraft, tax exemption for aircraft lease rentals paid to foreign lessors, tax incentive for relocating foreign funds in the IFSC, and to allow tax exemption to the investment division of foreign banks located in the IFSC. Pre-filling of returns. Honourable Speaker, in order to ease compliance for the tax TDS, etc., already come pre-filled in income tax returns. Reduce compliance burden on small charitable trusts running educational institutions and hospitals. To such entities whose annual receipt does not exceed 1 crore of rupees. I now propose to increase this amount to 5 crores. We have noticed that the contribution of employees toward provident funds, superannuation funds, and other social sectors deposit these contributions within the specified time. For these employees, this means a loss of interest or income. Later becomes financially unviable. Non-deposit results in a permanent loss for the ensure that employees' contributions are deposited on time. I reiterate that the late deposit of employees' contribution by the employer will not be allowed as deduction to the employer. Incentives for startups. Further, in order to incentivize funding for the startups, I propose to extend the capital gains exemption for GST proposals. I would like to appraise the House on GST. The GST is now 4 years old. Some of the measures include nil return through SMS, quarterly statements, pre-filled editable GST return, and staggering of. We have also deployed deep analytics and artificial intelligence to identify tax evaders and fake billers and launched special drives against them. The results speak for themselves. The GST Council has painstakingly tracked further and to remove anomalies rationalization. Our domestic manufacturing, global value chain, and export better The thrust now has to be on easy access to raw materials and exports of value-added products. Towards this, last year, we started overhauling the customs duty structure, eliminating 80 outdated exemptions. I also thank everyone who responded overwhelmingly to a crowdsourcing call for suggestions on this revamp. I now propose to review more than 400 old exemptions and from 1st October 2021, we will put in place a revised customs duty structure free of distortions. I also propose that any new customs duty exemptions, therefore, henceforth will have following 2 years from the date of the issue. Electronic and mobile phone and reducing customs duty uniformly to 7.5% on semis, flats, and long products of non-alloy to provide relief to metal recyclers, mostly MSMEs. I am exempting duty on steel 31st March 2022. Further, I am also revoking ADD and CVD on certain steel products. Also, to provide relief to copper recyclers, I am reducing duty on copper scrap from 5% to 2.5%. Textiles. The textile sector generates employment and contributes significantly to the economy. There is a need to rationalize duties on raw material inputs to man-made textiles. We are now bringing nylon chain on par with polyester and other man-made fibers. We are uniformly reducing the BCD rates on caprolactam, nylon chips, nylon fiber, and yarn to 5%. This will help the textile industry, MSMEs, and also overall exports. Chemicals. We have calibrated customs duty rates on chemicals to encourage domestic value addition and to remove inversions. Apart from other items, we are reducing customs duty on naphtha to 2.5% to correct inversion. Since the duty was raised from 10% in July 19, prices of precious metals have risen sharply. To bring it closer to previous levels, we are rationalizing customs duty on gold and silver. Renewable energy. In Part A, we have already acknowledged that solar energy has huge promise for India. To build up domestic capacity, we will notify a phased manufacturing plan for solar cells and solar panels. At present, to encourage domestic production, we are raising duty on solar inverters from 5% to 20% and on solar lanterns from 5% to 15%. Capital equipment and auto parts. There is immense potential in manufacturing heavy capital equipment domestically. We will comprehensively review the rate structure in due course. However, we are revising duty rates on certain items immediately. We propose to withdraw exemptions on tunnel boring machine. It will attract a customs duty of 7.5% and its parts a duty of 2.5%. We are raising customs duty on certain auto parts to 15% to bring them on par with general rate on auto parts. We are proposing certain changes to benefit MSMEs. We are increasing duty from 10 to 15% on steel screws. We are rationalizing exemption on import of duty-free items as an incentive to exporters of garments, leather in good quantity and quality, mostly by MSMEs. We have gemstones to encourage domestic processing. Agriculture products to benefit farmers on cotton, from nil to 10%. On raw silk and silk yarn from 10 to 15%. Denatured ethyl alcohol. Currently, rates are being uniformly calibrated to improve agricultural infrastructure so that we produce more, processing agricultural output efficiently. This will ensure enhanced remuneration for our farmers. To earmark resources for this purpose, I propose an agricultural infrastructure and development cess on a small number of items. However, while applying this cess, we have taken care not to put an easing of compliance.
Item number 3.
So I wish to lay on the table the following statements under Section 3(1) of the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act 2003, the medium-term fiscal policy, fiscal policy strategy statement, and macroeconomic framework statement.
Item number 4.
So I wish to seek your permission to move for leave to introduce the Finance Bill 2021.
प्रश्न ये कि विधेयक को पुनर्स्थापित करने की अनुमति प्रदान की जाए। जो सदस्य इसके पक्ष में हाँ कहें, जो सदस्य इसके विरोध में ना कहें। मेरे विचार में निर्णय हाँ वालों के पक्ष में हुआ, हाँ वालों के पक्ष हुआ। माननीय मंत्री जी विधेयक को पुनर्स्थापित करें। श्री प्रहलाद जोशी जी,
with your permission, I rise to present the 18th report of Business Advisory Committee.
माननीय सदस्यगण, बजट भाषण की प्रतियां प्रकाशक फलक पर उपलब्ध है। सदस्य अपनी प्रति प्रकाशन फलक से प्राप्त कर सकते हैं। माननीय सदस्यगण, जैसा कि आपको समाचार 2 के माध्यम से पहले सूचित किया जा चुका है कि बजट की प्रतियां आपको मेंबर्स पोर्टल के माध्यम से उपलब्ध कराई जा रही है। सभा की कार्रवाई मंगलवार दिनांक 2 फरवरी 2021 को स्थगित की जाती है।
Namely, East Coast Corridor from Kharagpur to Vijayawada.
All right, that was India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, who just presented what could be arguably the most important budget for India in recent years. Several key highlights, several key announcements made during this budget speech by India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. She's proposed to increase FDI limit from 49% to 74% in insurance projects, as well as, you know, India has become a reliable destination for foreign direct investment in India. And as far as farmers is concerned, the budget for the next financial year has also set a target of 16.5 lakh crore rupees as agricultural credit. The fund to improve rural infrastructure has been hiked from 30,000 crores to 40,000 crore rupees. Indian Finance Minister said that the government is committed to welfare of farmers, and that's reflected on the MSP regime as well. The minimum selling price assured price that is at least 1.5 times the cost of production across all commodities, and that farmers were paid 75,100 crore rupees on wheat MSP in financial year 2021. Stay with us on this broadcast as we'll be playing out the key reactions of India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. We'll also have a very esteemed panel of guests to decode the entire speech by the Finance Minister and tell you what lies in this budget for the common man as India emerges from the pandemic. But let's listen into what the Finance Minister said on farmers.
This will develop capacities of primary, secondary and tertiary care health systems, strengthen existing national institutions, and create new institutions to cater to detection and cure of new and emerging diseases. This will be in addition to the National Health Mission. The main interventions under the scheme are support for over 17,000 rural and 11,000 urban health and wellness centers, setting up integrated public and 3,382 block public health units in 11 states, districts and 12 central institutions. The pneumococcal vaccine, a made-in-India product, is presently limited to only 5 states. It will be rolled out across the country. This will avert more than 50,000 child deaths annually. Honourable Speaker, I have provided 35,000 crores of rupees for COVID-19 vaccine in this year 21-22. I am committed to provide further funds if required. Agriculture. Our government is committed to the welfare of farmers. The MSP regime has undergone a sea change to assure price that is at least 1.5 times the cost of production across all commodities. The procurement has also continued to increase at a steady pace. This has resulted in increase in payment to farmers substantially. In case of wheat, a total amount paid to farmers in 2013-14. Honourable Speaker, sir, the data that I give now is important for all honourable members to kindly hear. In case of wheat, the total amount paid to farmers in 2013-14 was 33,874 crores. In 2019-20, it was 62,802 crores. And even better, Honourable Speaker, in 2020-2021, this amount paid to farmers was 75,060 crores. Honourable Speaker, again an important fact, the number of wheat-growing farmers that were benefited increased in 2020-21 to 43.36 lakhs compared to 35.57 lakhs in 2019-20. The budget proposals for 21-22 rest on 6 pillars: health and well-being, physical and financial capital and infrastructure, inclusive development for aspirational India, reinvigorating human capital, innovation and R&D, and a 6th, minimum government and maximum governance. Disinvestment and strategic sale. In spite of COVID-19, we have kept working towards strategic disinvestment. A number of transactions, namely BPCL, Air India, Shipping Corporation of India, Container Corporation of India, IDBI Bank, Bharat Earth Movers Limited, Pavan Hans, Neelachal Ispat Nigam Limited, among others, would be completed in 21-22. Other than IDBI Bank, we propose to take up the 2 public sector banks and 1 general insurance company in the year 21-22. This would require legislative amendments, and I propose to introduce the amendments in this session itself.
That was India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman unveiling what is clearly a very significant budget in recent memory. And now to decode the budget and the highlights, joining us live on WION from Singapore is Jim Rogers, who is an international investor and author. Jim, welcome to WION. Now the Indian budget has officially been unveiled with a strong focus on healthcare spending and of course a more self-reliant India. Tell us more, what stood out for you?
Well, yes, I can see a lot of money is going to a lot of people. Oh, people won't have to pay taxes, healthcare, infrastructure, yes. But it's a gigantic budget deficit. I worry about young people in India. Apparently, the government does not worry about young people in India.
Right. Now, another big announcement, of course, the focus has this year been on healthcare spending in light of course, the COVID-19 vaccines and the economy at large. So what is the big takeaway for you when it comes to that sector of the economy?
Well, of course, if you're in healthcare, you're going to have a lot of benefits because there are a lot of sick people. I mean, the epidemic is terrible. So obviously, the more you can do to help sick people, the better. But somebody has to pay for it.
Right. And now, Jim, what about other sectors of the economy? Is corporate India happy with the policies announced?
Well, as far as I'm not Indian, so you don't have to listen to me. But I can see that farmers will be better off. Old people, many people will be better off in India. But I worry about young people because the debt. I mean, this is adding huge amounts to Indian debt, and that bothers me. It has always bothered me about India. It bothers me more now.
Right. All right, Jim, thank you so much for your inputs now. We'll now like to go across to our business editor, Sumit Chaturvedi, for an insight into how the markets are faring.
Well, thanks, Priyanka. Well, markets have clearly given a thumbs up to this budget. A lot of announcements, a lot of positives for them. Yes, the dampener being the fiscal deficit, but lots of announcements. So we can clearly see the Sensex going up, Sensex moving up, and 3.15%. That's what Sensex has gained so far. It has clearly jumped after the announcements were made. And the positive being no touching of taxes at all. Yes, there are some spending that's going to be there on healthcare infra. Yes, there's a small fund of agriculture infra says, but overall it's been given a thumbs up from the markets in India. Sensex 50 both up by more than 3%. Well, this is something because of the collective overall impact of today's announcement, and global markets are also up today. So keeping all that in mind, yes, no tinkering with taxes at all, no corporate tax rate increase, no increase in income tax. So this is all positive, moving towards the side the economy wants to go. Yes, infrastructure, agriculture, startups, all these have been given good money, and that's what markets are really cheering at this point of time. Insurance FDI is a big step from 49% to 74%. That is something that shows that India is open to more investments. Well, clearly nothing much for manufacturing, but overall this will go in a long way in bringing growth to Indian economy that really very badly needs growth at this moment, because what we have seen over the last 1 year was really not desired at all, and now we want really the big jump in growth happening, and that's what some of these impetus and steps will give. Back to you, Priyanka.
Right, thank you, Sumit. Now, still with us on this broadcast is Jim Rogers, an investor, international investor and author from Singapore. Jim, now, thanks for staying with us. Tell us about India's ambitious self-reliant program and the policies within the same. What are the challenges ahead in the current fiscal year?
Well, listen, first of all, it's wonderful that the market is going through the roof. I hope the Indian government will take advantage of it and increase privatization. It's a great opportunity to make India more efficient, more competitive, and it will also help the budget eventually, because somebody has to pay for this.
And now India, of course, is positioning itself as a huge manufacturing hub against China. So what does the country need to do to attract foreign investment at this crucial juncture?
You need to open your markets. It's very difficult for any foreigner to invest in India. As you probably know, Mr. Modi's done some great things. He's reformed GST. He's done a lot of things, but now he's got to open the economy to foreign investment. Yes, it's better than it was, but it's nothing compared to what it could be.
Right. All right. Jim, thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast, and thank you for all your insights. Let's now listen in to some highlights of the budget.
This will develop capacities of primary, secondary and tertiary care health systems, strengthen existing national institutions, and create new institutions to cater to detection and cure of new and emerging diseases. This will be in addition to the National Health Mission. The main interventions under the scheme are support for over 17,000 rural and 11,000 urban health and wellness centers, setting up integrated public health labs in all districts, and 3,382 block public health units in 11 states, establishing critical care hospital blocks in 602 districts and 12 central institutions. The pneumococcal vaccine, a made-in-India product, is presently limited to only 5 states. It will be rolled out across the country. This will avert more than 50,000 child deaths annually. Honorable Speaker, I have provided 35,000 crores of rupees for COVID-19 vaccine in this year 21-22. I am committed to provide further funds if required. Agriculture. Our government is committed to the welfare of farmers. The MSP regime has undergone a sea change to assure price that is at least 1.5 times the cost of production across all commodities. The procurement has also continued to increase at a steady pace. This has resulted in increase in payment to farmers substantially. In case of wheat, a total amount paid to farmers in 2013-14. Honorable Speaker, sir, the data that I give now is important for all honorable members to kindly hear. In case of wheat, the total amount paid to farmers in 2013-14 was 33,874 crores. In 2019-20, it was 62,802 crores. And even better, Honorable Speaker, in 2020-2021, this amount paid to farmers was 75,060 crores. Honorable Speaker, again an important fact, the number of wheat growing farmers that were benefited increased in 2020-21 to 43.36 lakhs compared to 35.57 lakhs in 2019-20. The budget proposals for 21-22 rest on 6 pillars: health and well-being, physical and financial capital and infrastructure, inclusive development for aspirational India, reinvigorating human capital, innovation and R&D, and a 6th, minimum government and maximum governance. Disinvestment and strategic sale. In spite of COVID-19, we have kept working towards strategic disinvestment. A number of transactions, namely BPCL, Air India, Shipping Corporation of India, Container Corporation of India, IDBI Bank, Bharat Earth Movers Limited, Pavan Hans, Neelachal Ispat Nigam Limited, among others, would be completed in 21-22. Other than IDBI Bank, we propose to take up the 2 public sector banks and 1 general insurance company in the year 21-22. This would require legislative amendments, and I propose to introduce the amendments in this session itself. I propose to amend the Insurance Act 1938 to increase the permissible FDI limit from 49% to 74% in insurance companies and allow foreign ownership and control with safeguards. Under the new structure, the majority of directors on the board and key management persons would be resident Indians, with at least 50% of directors being independent directors and specified percentage of profits being retained as general reserve. Setting up a new structure.
For a better understanding of the budget, joining me now in the news studio is Gautam Chickenmurray, the Vice President of the Observer Research Foundation. Gautam, thanks so much for joining us. So tell us, the budget has officially been unveiled. Lots of focus on healthcare spending, infrastructure, and of course vaccines against COVID-19. What were your big takeaways?
The first thing is that a fiscal deficit of 6.8%.
Right.
Everybody expected it may be much higher. Quite like the 9% last year. We thought it may be in double digits because this is a year when there's a whole lot and without increasing taxes. So I thought that fiscal deficit would increase. The fact that Nirmala Sitharaman has kept it at 6.8, which is high, but in a black swan event like the COVID post-COVID recovery, it's a low number. The economic survey had prepared us for much higher. So I think that's a very good news. It means that despite the increased spending that you talked about, and it's there in the budget papers, inflation will remain under control, expenses will remain under control. So I find these to be very good. 64,000 crore going into healthcare, vaccines, 1 lakh, a whole lot of push on infrastructure, tracks or corridors or new investment, where a whole lot of jobs will be created. Activity will be a good thing, and no wonder the market is up 1,600 points. But public finances or tax collections, but will impact. But it's an important takeaway as far, and they are using AI, big data to give you a prefixed form, less compliances, and all very good. The moment you have a face, it means there is a bribe or a potential for rent taking, rent seeking. All that has ended. So this budget has done a lot. It may not get the credit in terms of numbers of lakh crores or thousands of crores, etc. But it just in terms of citizen convenience, ease of living, this budget has started the journey which we have all been talking about for a very long time.
Fiscal deficit be an alarming concern as of now. Where is the money coming from?
Not at all. It's not alarming at all. In fact, the world over in G20 have been talking about easing, and I think we need to stop thinking about the rest of the world. India has done very well on the vaccine front. It is doing well. The fact that we did not spend earlier and have begun to spend now has been very beautifully articulated. Yes, foot on the brake. So India had put foot on the brakes in terms of lockdown, in terms of stopping all economic activity, and now that suppliers of vaccine across the world, not only in India, now we can start accelerating, and that's what whole glide path that has been written by the NK committee, and we will get there, but by 2025 problem.
Right. Let's talk about vaccines. Of course, a huge highlight of this budget. The Finance Minister announced rupees 35,000 crore for 2 more vaccines are likely apart from the 2 that are already available. So tell us more about the same and how will this be received by pharma companies?
And it is strong enough that countries around the world are asking. I think we have already exported to about 9 countries, and there are another 70 countries that are seeking to have tie-ups either through purchases or through other kinds of arrangements. It is clear that India is now the leader in at least the COVID vaccine area. It is the pharmacy of the world. We should not let this momentum go away, and the government, its official, just wiped out. India has done very well. It will continue to do well.
Right.
Rest of the pharma companies, they can manage their own business. Maybe they want margins. Maybe India, they will have to benchmark against the pricing that India is offering and bring their products on. We don't know how this will play out, and it should continue.
Gautam, now let's talk about the agriculture sector, especially in light of the recent unrest that the country has witnessed.
The two are unrelated. The unrest is because of 3 new laws. In fact, correct myself, the unrest is because of willfully misreading.
Right.
I have met have not read the laws.
Right.
They are not very big laws. For instance, the Essential Commodities Amendment is a very minor. Have a quarrel with some parts of the law. For instance, the dispute mechanism should be judicial rather than... but so that is one aspect of it. That is what the noise is. In terms of allocation, to read the papers, so right. I'm talking blind here. But last year's budget was around 9% of expenditure was going on agriculture, of which 4% was going to warehousing. So it's such a waste. Do we really want to encourage wastefulness, play on this drama, versus whether India should grow, create new jobs in manufacturing, services, is the bigger question.
Jobs, especially in light in the shadow of the coronavirus pandemic, when millions of jobs have been lost. Did this budget answer the question that will there be more
capital expenditure that the government is has initiated in infrastructure industries, like I mentioned, rail, not spending on day to day, but just the capital expenditure. That shows that the government is willing to put it. So we are all hoping, I hope, my personal thing is that government has started the process of investing in capital expenditure that will create jobs for people, as well as cycle of investments, jobs, GDP and wealth.
Right. Let's talk about compliances and taxation now, since that always is something that everybody wants to know about. Will there be a big change going forward for taxpayers, salaried employees? We heard about relief for senior citizens, people over 75 years, now exempt from...
Yeah, exempt from filing taxes, tax returns is okay, but I think the other ease of compliance is in terms of faceless interactions with the tax authorities, disputes that have been now raised only after 50 lakh, if I remember correctly, can now those disputes happen. In any case, they will be faceless, and if at all something at the highest tax bureaucrats will need their permission. So to me, it's good that the government has started moving in this direction. But along with ease of compliance, what I found missing in the budget, the tax base. That debate has seemed to have vanished. But having said that, the fact that she did not touch income tax rates is okay. I'm unhappy with 11 tax slabs, by the way.
Right.
And then again, there are 7 or 8 on the old side. So if you multiply them, and it is not tax friendly. It is not friendly for a normal person. We should come back to 3 rates. But the fact that she has not...
And India program, the kind of focus that was laid upon this during this budget. So what do you think going forward will be the challenges of the same?
Firstly, there seems to be some form of moral allegation on India that India is Atmanirbhar Bharat is as though it's a 4-letter word. That this is out of... So to that extent, that if India is doing what the rest of the world is, I don't see the problem.
Right.
Having said that, outlier, that we will remain open while other countries will remain closed. That cannot happen. So I think the real answer to these discussions are going to happen mostly in G20, which will set the broad agenda, which is like the board of directors of the world, of the economy, and followed by WTO. So between these 2 organizations, where India is an active participant, some new equilibriums will be established. So if we have telecom components and so on, fine, it's fine. It's not out of sync with any other countries. It's not happening.
Right. Gautam, my final question as we wrap up this discussion now. This budget was highly anticipated. The world, in a sense, was watching India as it presented pandemic and the economic fallout, massive job losses, but yet there were signs of a positive recovery that we were seeing recently. So can
there are some it's a heavy word. It's a loaded word.
Right.
This is not 1991, by the way. It's not. So some aspects are important. For instance, the government has taken some brave steps, bold steps in disinvestment. It is going to disinvest parts of 2 public sector banks, LIC in the next 2 years. Air India in the next 2 years will be through strategic sale. These are all good things. Air India selling means no more loss to taxpayers.
Right.
The others will help deepen the capital markets. They have become a little shallow. There is too much money which is chasing too few deep enough stocks.
Right.
With these disinvestments, perhaps the stock market will deepen. Particularly the LIC IPO. I don't know the values, but even if they disinvestment, even 10%, you're looking at another Sensex, another company entering the Sensex.
Right.
And so the deepening of the markets will help. So that's a bold step. The fact that the fiscal deficit has remained only 6.8 when we were expecting it to be 9 or 10 is a very bold step. I don't know how that's going to play out. Ease of compliances, we have already discussed. That's not a bold step, but it's a much needed step. This should have happened 70 years ago.
Right.
But okay, even now it's okay. I like that. Those 11 tax slabs, she has to reduce them back to 3, which Chidambaram had started in his 1998 budget and has been gone on for about since then until they were raised last year.
Right.
So I think that part needs to come. Corporate taxes are already low. Action. I think the government has done enough.
Right. Okay.
Now we need
Gautam,
to see
we'll
action
continue
from the
our
people.
discussion on the other side of this short break. Time now to take a break.
India Budget 2021, presented by powered by LIC, हर पल आपके साथ। जिंदगी खिल उठे।
WION now available in the United States. Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views,
Welcome to Gravitas and Palki Sharma Upadhyay.
India Budget 2021. Presented by MRF ZLX. You can bet on it. Powered by LIC. Harpal Aapke Saath. Co-powered by Cred. Download the app. All new Nissan Magnite. Ignite your charisma. Usha Bloom Series fans. Zindagi Khil Utte.
For India's COVID vaccines, Minister announced a new public health scheme. The Atmanirbhar Health Yojana with an outlay of rupees 65,000 crores. And besides this, the government will also set up 15 health emergency centres. The budget has set a target of 16.5 lakh crores in the agricultural credit. The fund to improve rural infrastructure has been hiked from 30,000 to 40,000 crore rupees. That the government farmers. The government set a target of 1.75 lakh crores. Public sector banks will be divested in 2022. The government has pegged the fiscal deficit at 9.5% but expects to bring it below 4.5% by the financial year 2026. On FDI, India has raised the limit in insurance sector from 49% to 74%.
To 43.36 lakhs. Compared to 35.5. This will develop capacities of primary, secondary and emerging diseases. This will be in a support for over 17,000 rural and 11,000 urban, setting up integrated public health labs in all districts and 3,000 public health units in 11 states, establishing critical care hospital blocks in 602 districts and 12 central institutions. Pneumococcal vaccine, a made-in-India product, is presently limited to only 5 states. It will be rolled out across the country. More than 50,000 child deaths annually. Honorable Speaker, I have provided 35,000 crores of rupees for COVID-19 vaccine in this year 21-22. I am committed to provide further funds if required. Agriculture. Our government is committed to the welfare of farmers. The MSP regime 5 times the cost of production across all commodities. Resulted in increase in payment. In case of wheat, a total amount paid to farmers in 2013-14. Honorable Speaker, sir, the data that I give now is important for all honourable members to kindly hear. In case of wheat, the total amount paid to farmers in 2013-14 was 33,874 crores. In 2019-20, it was 62,802 crores. And even better, Honourable Speaker, in 2020-2021, this amount paid to farmers was 75,060 crores. Honourable Speaker, again an important fact, the number of wheat growing farmers that were benefited increased in 2020-21 to 43 compared to 35.57 lakhs in 2019-20. The budget proposals for 21-22 rest on 6 pillars: health and well-being, physical and financial capital and infrastructure, inclusive development for aspirational India, reinvigorating human capital, innovation and R&D, and a 6th, minimum government and maximum governance. Disinvestment and strategic sale. In spite of COVID-19, we have kept working towards strategic disinvestment. A number of transactions, namely BPCL, Air India, Shipping Corporation of India, Container Corporation of India, IDBI Bank, Bharat Earth Movers Limited, Pavan Hans, Neelachal Ispat Nigam Limited, among others, would be completed in 21-22. Other than IDBI Bank, we propose to take up the 2 public sector banks and 1 general insurance company in the year 21-22. This would require legislative amendments, and I propose to introduce the amendments in this session itself. I propose to amend the Insurance Act 1938 to increase the permissible FDI limit from 49% to 74% in insurance companies and allow foreign ownership and control with safeguards. The majority of directors on the board and key management persons would be resident Indians, with at least 50% of directors being independent directors and specified percentage of profits being retained as general reserve. Stressed asset resolution by setting up a new structure.
To understand some of these highlights better, still with me in the news studio is Gautam Chikharmani, who is the Vice President of the Observer Research Foundation. Gautam, thanks so much for staying with us. Now let's talk about some of the big hits and misses of the Union Budget, according to you.
Yeah, so it's still a work in progress. I'm still reading it. But the more I'm reading, I think the big story is clearly infrastructure.
Right.
And within infrastructure, capital spending on infrastructure. This was expected, this was needed, and this will ignite further investments, and I hope it will turn into a virtuous cycle of investments, growth, jobs. For instance, this the infra increase in expenditure to 5.5 lakh crore. I think that's a big number.
Right.
It's much required. Then within that, there are things like asset monetization, where the government plans to monetize roads, airports, railways, asset reconstruction company. There's a talk about an asset reconstruction company which will take on the bad debts, the bad assets sales. I think this will ease the pressure on banking, which is another required thing.
Right.
In terms of misses, I still need to read it carefully. But I think this increasing FDI in insurance to 74%, it's a good thing.
Right.
Make it 100% for all I care. But the actual reform and what is required in insurance is a reform of the regulator, which is Insurance Regulatory Development Authority, and insurance sector is somehow evading surveillance by the government, by taxpayers, by citizens, and it has been institutionalized into what can be called anti-consumer regulator. Neither does it give data, nor are consumers given the return that they get. For some reason, the government after government, this is nothing to do with this budget or with this government, but government after government has been unwilling to or unable to reform insurance in the manner that it ought to be, which is make it consumer facing. The way, for instance, Securities and Exchange Board of India has reformed mutual funds. That's a truly a transparent area. So 9 now is going to go to 74. It will deliver greater penetration into the market. That not happen. It will give more products. That has happened, but at what cost? And how many of, for instance, in health insurance, consumers are constantly facing problems, but more so during the COVID. Increasing insurance to 74% is another tick box. Right. But I don't think the the real problems in the insurance sector. You clearly need to fix this. The second thing which I find like a return to the past, and it's a needless thing, is the setting up of another development finance institution. Finance institutions. We had IFCI in 1955, ICICI came, and in 1964 we had IDBI. They've all become banks.
Right.
So if development finance is not a sustainable out of the blue, and I think it may sound towards infrastructure and so on, but it's a failed organization. It's a failed model. I think we can look at better things, a greater securitization. Now the government can raise money directly from people. For instance, if you start a deep discount bond, for instance. But I don't know why this has come, where this will go, but this looks like going back to Nehru and Indira Gandhi days, and I don't see any reason for it.
All right, Gautam, thanks for that. We'll continue our discussion shortly. For now, let's go over to our business editor, Sumit Chaturvedi, for an insight into how the markets are faring at this point.
Well, Priyanka, thanks for having me. Here, markets are really giving a big thumbs up to today's budget. Sensex, as we speak, has gone up by 2,000 points since morning, when clearly we can say that bulls are back into the Indian markets once again. It's clearly something they were expecting, so the markets were building up since today morning, and these announcements, they have given more boost to markets. Hearing, or there were rumors in the markets that there could be more corona cess or more corporate tax could be there. Well, that has not. 50 both up at this moment. Any other long-term capital gain tax that this. So clearly, overall, we can say that bulls are ruling the Indian markets once again. Today's on healthcare scheme. This has given big boost to economy. Yes, agri says infrastructure is there, and it is to be seen on what all. Clearly, markets are in a very good mood right now. Sensex up by more than 2,000 points as we speak since the morning. They were up by. Forward to is RBI's meeting on Friday. Well, that is something we have to look forward to. But overall, as we see from March, when March last year, when the markets came down heavily and Sensex was at 25
Right. Now, announce further recapitalization of rupees 20,000 crore for the public sector banks to clean up the non-performing assets. Reconstruction company and asset management companies will take over the stressed assets and sell to alternative investors. The initial public offering of Life Insurance Corporation of India will be out in financial year 2022.
The high level of provisioning by Public Construction Company Limited and Asset Management Company would be set up to consolidate assets to alternative investment funds and other potential investors for eventual value of PSB. Capital capacity of PSBs. Further recapitalization of 20,000 crores is proposed in 21-22. Deposit insurance. Last year,
breaking all traditions, the Finance Minister of India, Nirmala Sitharaman, ditched the Bahi Khata on the budget day and switched to a Made in India tablet. For the budget presentation each year, the Finance Ministers were always seen carrying a briefcase to the Parliament. Moving forward with the time, the current Finance Minister switched to a tablet, making the budget of 2021 entirely paperless. Now, this is provided to all members of the Parliament, enabled hassle-free access to budget documents by the MPs and the general. The decision to go paperless this year was also due to the Research Foundation. Gautam, my question to you. Tell us about the markets and how they are performing today. Explain to us why they are rising.
I think if I could explain markets to you, I wouldn't be sitting here. But let me give it a shot. I think in the last year, which is 2020, companies that had come into the corporate has helped sort of cut costs. At the same time now, in the expectation of revival, we saw the Sensex touch 50,000 a couple of weeks ago. Why it has been lower than what was expected? I think the markets well, I don't know about the markets. I certainly markets too. Now that it is only 6.8%, it is perhaps good that the fiscal deficit is the fiscal finances of the government are under control despite such bad times. The second thing I feel is that there is a sharp thrust and an open thrust on infrastructure. 35% increase to 5 lakh crore. I think that's very big. It is big also because this is the time that the government is showing that we are willing to spend to create infrastructure upon which the next level of growth will happen and upon which the other companies after a quarter or two will ride. Of that ride, and maybe companies will do it faster. And my sense is they will do it within this quarter, but I'm just hedging myself here. So the government spending on infrastructure has begun, upon which private companies will ride, due to which profits may rise, and therefore the markets are increasing. Overall, I think when you look at markets, we should not take the short-term movements too seriously.
Right.
I think markets work in the long term. You talk about 5 years, 10 years, 30 years. And that's when markets, as far as consumers are concerned, investors, small investors are concerned, give you the kind of returns that they do. In this particular case, I think it is clearly infrastructure and fiscal deficit.
Right. Right. Gautam, let's talk about corporate India. Anything significant in the budget for India's MNCs?
I think tax rates have remained the same, which he had done earlier. So nothing specific has come, except that during this bad time, no new taxes have been. In fact, maybe because there is everybody expected perhaps, where will the money come from? And they would increase the taxes. The fact that she hasn't done so is maybe also a relief why the markets are up. So I don't know. I think companies, the ball is now clearly with the companies. The government has done what it had to do. Back together and start building, start making, delivering services. If at all anything, that what we would expect from the government is that it should get the regulatory cholesterol out of the way over the next few months, maybe even the next 12 months. Regulatory cholesterol in the sense that there are 1,500 laws that govern doing business in India. There are 70,000 compliances at an aggregate that companies need to deliver. There are 6,600 filings that companies need to do. Each filing has a whole lot of paperwork behind it, whole lot of information, data collection, and various avenues for rent seeking. If the government can start clearing this part, so taking the budget as a precursor to investment, and investments being catalyzed by a further reduction or ending of regulatory infrastructure, regulatory cholesterol, then I think the companies will, the India story will ride faster than the 11.5% that IMF is talking about.
All right, Gautam, thank you so much for all your insights on the budget and for helping us decode. Stay tuned. We'll continue decoding the budget on the next segment.
India Budget 2021, presented by MRF ZLX. You can bet on it. Powered by LIC, Harpal Aapke Saath. Co-powered by Cred. Download the app. All new Nissan Magnite. Ignite your charisma. Usha Bloom Series fans. Zindagi Khil Utte.
WION now available in the United States. Download the app now. Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views, and analysis. World is one.
analysis, unrivaled perspective, and exclusive ground reports. Watch West Asia Post every Friday, 80 Francis, only on WION. World is One.
One world trade center that is the one where the impact.
The cause of India's freedom. I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
WION now available in the United States. Download the app now.
Budget 2021, presented by MRF ZLX. You can bet on. Co-powered by Cred. Download the app. All new Nissan Magnite. Ignite your charisma. Usha Bloom Series.
Into the key takeaways from the Indian budget. First, a quick check on the top stories we are tracking. India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman lays out an extensive plan for trying circumstances like the move is aimed at attracting overseas players.
the farmer agitation, India's Finance Minister says that the government is committed to the welfare of farmers, dedicates a significant part of the budget to announcements on agriculture. And markets cheer the budget proposals. Indian stock markets at a record. On to some other stories that are making headlines across the world. Myanmar's military seizes power in a bloodless coup, detaining the democratically elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi as it imposes a one-nation comes after weeks of rising tensions between the military and the civilian government over allegations of fraud in November. The coup sparks global condemnation, with the United States leading calls for democracy. Expresses deep concern, says it has always supported the process of democratic transition in Myanmar. The military has taken control of the country for 1 year. Myanmar's leader Aung San Suu Kyi and other senior figures from the ruling party were detained in a series of transition. The Myanmar military has rebuked foreign embassies. Myanmar's foreign general has been appointed acting president of the country's military. A local TV station broadcast images of Mensue in the voter lists for November 8 elections were discovered. The Union Election Commission failed to settle this matter, and the military believes the problem must be resolved according to law, with Article 417 of the 2008 Constitution. According to the ruling party, the National League for Democracy spokesman and other leaders had been, quote-unquote, taken away. A regional member of parliament in Myanmar was seen on live video footage being taken away by the soldiers. Papahan, a regional MP of Pantong Township in Pai, was seen. Phone links to the capital were not reachable in the early hours of Monday. The raids have taken place on the day when the parliament in the capital was due to start sitting after a November election that the NLD had won in a landslide. Even as tensions escalate between the civilian authorities and the powerful military, saying that a dozen soldiers were in front of the building that houses the city administration, while several military technical issues disabling broadcast. Myanmar Radio and Television also said in a post on its Facebook page, and I'm quoting now, due to current communication difficulties, we would like to respectfully inform you that the regular programs of MRTV and the entire world has been closely watching the developments unfold in Myanmar. The Indian Ministry of External Affairs has also issued a statement on the developments in Myanmar. The statement from the ministry read, India has always been steadfast in its support to the process of democratic transition in Myanmar. We believe that the rule of law and democratic process must be upheld. We are monitoring the situation closely. The United States has warned of response over the military detention of the Myanmar officials. Statement by the White House spokesperson reading, President Biden has been briefed by the NSA. We continue to affirm our strong support for Burma's democratic institutions and urge the military and all other parties to adhere to democratic norms and the rule of law and to release those detained today. The United States opposes any attempt to alter the outcome of the recent elections or to impede Myanmar's democratic transition and will take action against those responsible if these steps are not reversed. We are monitoring the situation closely and stand with the people of Burma. The State Secretary Antony Blinken has called on the military to reverse these actions immediately. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson also has reacted, condemning the coup in Myanmar after the military in the country seized power. Boris Johnson called to free Aung San Suu Kyi and other civilian leaders. The United Nations head also strongly condemning the military detention of the Myanmar leaders. In a statement, the Secretary General strongly condemned the detention of the State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi, the President and other political leaders. These developments represent a serious blow to democratic reforms in Myanmar. The Secretary General reaffirms the unwavering support of the United Nations to the people of Myanmar in their pursuit of democracy, peace, human rights, and the rule of law. The Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary has also said that the concerned parties in Myanmar should resolve the issue peacefully through dialogue in accordance. The Japanese government is also preparing for all possible measures to ensure the safety of the Japanese residents.
民主的プロセスにのっとり、当事者が対話を通じて平和裏に問題を解決することが重要と考えており、これまでも関係者に対してその旨働きかけたところであります。状況いかんにかかわらず現地法人の安全確保には万全を期す考えでありますが、現時点で現地大使館から在留邦人に対して本件につきメールで注意喚起を行ったところであります。
The Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison also said that reports of Myanmar's military seizing power were disturbing developments.
Well, these are rather disturbing developments. I'm aware of those troubling reports, and the Foreign Minister has been following them very closely, and Marisa, you've already issued a statement on this matter as I understand it. The details, I've got to say, are very limited because of communications that were reportedly cut. And it's still relatively early in Myanmar. We've been a long-standing of our government, first elected in 2013 to visit Myanmar when I was the then Minister for Immigration.
The Human Rights Watch also condemned the military coup in Myanmar. The Deputy Director of Human now our worst nightmare come true.
In the elections, a clear majority, a situation where democratic rule was going to be and overnight the military just basically tore up the rule book. They're using the 2008 Constitution, was written by the military for the military, put through a fraudulent. Once again, the government of a military which never really gave up power. This is, probably the worst possible outcome we could imagine.
On to our other key contests. First, full-fledged pandemic budget. As expected, there was a huge emphasis on health and welfare. The health budget outlay was increased by 137% to rupees 2.83 lakh crores. This includes around 35,000 crores for India's COVID-19 vaccine drive. The Finance Minister said that at least 2 or more India-made around 2,200 crores have also been allocated to tackle air pollution in major urban centres. The government reiterated its support for the farmers, also setting a target of 16.5 lakh crores. And joining us this minute is Jayant Krishna, who is the Group CEO of. With us from Hong Kong is Simon Lee, who is the Co-Director, International Business and Chinese Enterprise.
This is not an easy budget because of the COVID-19 difficulty. The Indian government need to spend lots of money, or going to spend lots of money in building an infrastructure. When I look at the World Economic Forum Global Competitiveness Report 2019, before the COVID-19 time, India lacks developing countries. We need good infrastructure, so lots of money spent on the railway, on the urban transport, and also on some other infrastructure to and this can attract more foreign investment. Another highlight is on the healthcare system. You just mentioned, is slightly below 70, and then with improvement in the life expectancy, the healthcare bring about lots of employment and the economy. Economic development in the related sector.
Krishna, how satisfied are you with the health sector allocation in this budget?
I think, India spends barely 1.3% of its GDP on healthcare. That's a public spend on healthcare. And the Prime Minister has been saying to raise it to 3% even before the pandemic had hit us. So I think increase of outlay by about 130% is a step in the right direction. But how would the poorest of the poor, would get benefited? I think that's a $1 million question. But along with that, there are also some pharmaceutical sector reforms which are very, very important. Pharma pricing issues, which the national regulator has to look into. So I think this is a budget, which is business as usual. See, most investors overseas, they look for some kind of a regulatory certainty. So itself is a good thing. No significant changes in the taxes. So it reflects some kind of a stability in the policy. That has not happened. That's a big relief. From a foreign investor point of view, I think DI in the insurance sector coming from overseas companies, including we have seen wherever PLI there has been a tangible improvement in the investments increased by about 13% to come at a level of about $50 billion, And we don't have estimates available, but there's every indication that during the pandemic year also this figure may not go down significantly because the entire world is looking at India as a possible destination, as they're attempting to relocate part of their manufacturing supply chains from China to elsewhere. So I think these are all good steps, and also about 5.54 lakh crore worth of allocation for infrastructure. Because infrastructure is sector, and it creates jobs and things like that, and of course quality of infrastructure improves. Then it's good for the industry, good for the citizens. It improves the Human Development Index. So these are all good things in the budget. Only disappointment to my mind is we were expecting. So while a little bit of tweaking has been done, with mobile chargers, with the textile, with the solar auto parts, but I think exemptions, which presumably would be 400, as the government would relook and completely restructure their customs duty regime.
And there's been a growing need to create supply chain alternatives amid the pandemic, and that situation that we've seen across the world, given the economic scenario. Would you say that this budget is in supply chain alternatives and shifting supply chains away from China?
May or may not number of years, because
right, so directional
it takes time to
in
build
that
all
sense.
the infrastructure. The direction is correct. I even propose to remove, so to a certain extent that deficit could be a little bit higher to build the required infrastructure. Foreign investor, they try to look for more opportunities, especially.
Krishna, would you say the divestment target here is achievable or not?
Government has to, look at. One good thing is that instead of disinvestment or divestment, the term disinvestment is in the process, and IPO, is in the pipeline. I think bother too much about the political backlash that disinvestment happens, that the brings in, or such controversial things bring in, because it's not government's business to be in business. I mean, everybody has said so, and the money, that amount that you monetize can be used for nation building in multiple ways, in creating jobs, and challenging. Look at our track record in the last few years, but as they say, when there is a will, there is a way.
Budget is all the more significant. How optimistic are you that India is on the right path when it comes to economic India's favor for now?
Now it depends on the effectiveness of the vaccine. Now we think the use of the vaccine. Some people pass away after the injection, but I think those are minorities. If the only India recovers, but then the situation is still quite worse in Europe and United States, then I think it will have quite a negative impact on the overall recovery. But I'm quite optimistic on that.
To focus on the infrastructural push that the government has been making, that's been one key takeaway that definitely addresses the need for creating demand.
Yes, first of all, let's look at infrastructure projects are mostly capital intense. It will stimulate the latent demand. Some of it we have seen, happening around Diwali steadily and continuing even in the later months. Sure. And some of the things, small as they may seem, I think a few incentives have been announced for textile and, which is apparel, rather, apparel manufacturing and leather, cars and things like that. Their manufacturing investments today are very, very capital intensive. They do not create as many jobs. But, these are sectors which are still where the advent of technology has not been as much, and they're largely manpower intensive. So there's this mega and things like that, and incentive for leather. I think this hopefully, I have not gone into the detail because one has to go through in fine print. But if it is done with the right earnestness, I think these two sectors, in the overall scheme of things, they are not very fancy sectors. People don't talk about it, but they can create their employment intensive, which is very, very important. The poor and the hapless have suffered more than the rich and the well-to-do and well-placed people. So I think that's very good, and even which has been announced, which is good. So I think these are all steps in the right direction. Much promise.
And like you rightly pointed out, the fine print will have to be studied, and the implementation will be the next crucial part on India Budget 2021. With that, we are taking a very short breather. Lots more lined up on the other side.
India Budget 2021, presented by Cred. Download the app. All new Nissan Magnite. Ignite your charisma. Usha Bloom series fans. Zindagi Khel Utte.
WION now available in the United States. Download the app now.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
Presented by MRF ZLX. You can bet on it.
Whopping 35,019 vaccines in the budget for the coming year. Rupees 2.83 lakh crore allocated for the total health expenditure. The government proposes to increase the foreign direct investment limit in the insurance sector to 74%. And the markets cheer the budget report. On to other stories that are making headlines around the world. Myanmar's military seizes power in a bloodless coup, detaining democratically elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi. The dramatic escalation comes after weeks of rising tensions between the military and the civilian government over allegations of fraud in the November election. The coup sparks global condemnation, with the United States leading calls for democracy to be immediately restored. India Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has presented India's first full-fledged pandemic budget. As expected, there was a huge emphasis on health in vaccination drive. The Finance Minister said that at least 2 or more India-made vaccines are in the pipeline. Around 2,200 crores have also been allocated to tackle air pollution in the major urban centers. The Finance Minister announced a new public health scheme, Atmanirbhar Health Yojana, with an outlay of 65. The government also setting up 15 health emergency centers. Listen in.
This will develop capacities of primary, secondary and tertiary care health systems, strengthen existing national institutions and create new institutions to cater to detection and cure of new and emerging. Support for over 17,000 rural and 11,000 urban health and wellness centers, 3,382 block public health units in 11 states, establishing critical care hospital blocks in 602 districts and 12 central institutions. The new rolled out across the country. This will avert more than 50,000 child deaths annually. Honorable Speaker, I have provided 35,000 crores of rupees for further funds if required.
Informed the House that the government had paid 75 25,000 crores to farmers in wheat procurement.
The regime has undergone a sea change to assure price that is at least 1.5 times the cost of production across all. The procurement is at a steady pace. This has resulted in an increase in payments to farmers substantially. In 2013-14, Honorable Speaker, case of wheat, the total amount paid to farmers in 2013-14 was 33,874 crores. In 2019-20, Speaker, in 2020-2021, this amount paid to farmers was 75,060 crores. Honorable Speaker, again an important fact, the number of wheat growing farmers that were benefited increased in 2020-21 to 43.36 lakhs.
On disinvestment, the government set a target of 1.75 lakh crores to public in the financial year 2022.
In spite of COVID-19, we have kept working towards strategic disinvestment. Corporation of India, IDBI Bank, Bharat Earth Movers Limited, Power Limited, among others, would be completed in 21-22. Other than IDBI Bank, 2 public sector banks and 1 general insurance company in the year 21-22. This would require legislative amendments, and I propose in itself the high level of provisioning by public sector banks, a measure to clean up the bank books. An asset reconstruction company limited and to consolidate and take over the existing stressed debt and then manage and disbursement funds and other potential investors for eventual value realization. Capacity of PSBs, further recapitalization of 20,000 crores is proposed in deposit insurance. Last year,
the government has pegged the fiscal deficit at 9.5%, but expects to bring it in 26. On FDI, India has raised the limit in insurance sector from 49. Other crucial move as a part of the budget. The next financial year will also bring a bill for development of financial institutions. The financial institution will facilitate financing greenfield infrastructure projects. A capital of 200 billion rupees has been allocated. Proposals for the taxation regime as well. Exemption for senior citizens for filing income tax returns has now been proposed. Changes in personal income taxes for non-resident Indians also in
2020-2021. This amount paid to farmers was 75,000.
Breaking all traditions, the Finance Minister of India on the budget day and switched to a Made in India tablet to present the budget. Multiple reasons. Each year, the finance ministers have always been seen carrying a briefcase to the Parliament. This enabled hassle-free access to the budget documents by the members of the Parliament and the general public using the simplest form of digital governance and convenience. Forced the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Digital India and Make in India missions. We'll continue getting you the key takeaways from the Indian budget, but for now, turning our attention to the latest coming in from Myanmar. The story has been making headlines across the country for 1 year. Myanmar's leader Aung San Suu Kyi and other key figures from the ruling party were detained, impeding transition. The Myanmar military has rebuked foreign embassies and also the condemnation that has been coming in now. Broadcast images of Minsway holding a meeting after the military staged the coup. Myanmar army has now put out a statement on the state of emergency and the handing over of the governance and jurisdiction to the commander-in-chief. It said the state of emergency is effective of huge discrepancies in the voter lists for the November 8 elections were discovered. The union election declared in accordance with Article 417 of the 2008 Constitution. Now, according to the ruling party, a regional member of the parliament in Myanmar was seen live on TV on video footage being taken away by the soldiers. Township in Pai was seen being escorted out of her residence by the military personnel. Her warrant. Phone lines to the capital were not reachable in the early hours of Monday. The raids have taken place on the day when the parliament in the capital was due to start sitting after a November election and even as tensions escalate between the civilian government and the powerful military, members of parliament took their seats. Soldiers were deployed outside the city hall in Myanmar's main city of Yangon. MRTV reported having technical issues disabling broadcast. Myanmar Radio and Television said on a post on its Facebook page, and I'm quoting now, due to current communication difficulties, we would like to respectfully inform you that the regular programs of MRTV TV and Myanmar radio cannot be broadcast. The military takeover is a sharp towards democracy that Myanmar made in recent years. Analysts are calling it a likely end of Suu Kyi's political career. It could also be shocking, a shocking fall from power for Suu Kyi, who led the democratic struggle despite years under house arrest. She even won a Nobel Peace Prize for her efforts. But
after all, she's getting old. There are questions about her health. There is little future. They do not like her, and they do not want her to be part of the country's future. And therefore, getting really is a very important part of their game plan. I don't believe that those who are arrested need to fear for their lives, but they certainly need to fear for their safety and security. I think that what the military want to do is really force them into capitulation rather than threaten them physically.
And the entire world is watching the developments in Myanmar very closely. Indian Ministry of External Affairs has also issued a statement on the developments in Myanmar. The state rule of law and the democratic process must be upheld. We are monitoring the situation closely. The United States also expressed grave concern regarding the military coup in Myanmar. The United States officials, the statement by the White House spokesperson read, and I'm quoting now. President Biden has been briefed by the NS for Burma's democratic institutions and urged the military and all other parties to adhere to democratic norms and the rule of law. The United States opposes any attempt to alter the outcome of the recent elections or impede Myanmar's democratic transition and will take action. The State Secretary Antony Blinken has called on the military to reverse these actions immediately. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson also condemned the coup in Myanmar after the military. Johnson has called to free Aung San Suu Kyi and other civilian leaders. The Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary said that the concerned parties in Myanmar should resolve the issue peacefully through dialogue in accordance with the democratic process.
我が国は民主的プロセスにのっとり当事者が対話を考えており、これまでも関係者に対してその旨働きかけたところであります。状況一貫にかかわらず、現地法人の安全確保には万全を期す。現時点で、現地大使館から在留邦人に対して本件につきメールで注意喚起を行ったところであります。
The Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison, also said that the reports of Myanmar's military seizing power were disturbing.
Rather disturbing development. troubling reports in the Foreign Minister relatively early in Myanmar, a long-standing supporter of Myanmar's democratic transition, including our government first elected in 2013 to visit Myanmar when I was the then Minister for Immigration.
Has halted the release of Omar Sheikh, the murderer of American journalist Daniel Pearl, for the next 24 hours. Government's appeal against Sheikh's until tomorrow. However, the top court has barred the Sindh government from issuing fresh detention orders . The federal government's immediate plea seeking relief against Sheikh's release. Meanwhile, file a review petition against the Supreme Court verdict. The American journalist family rejected the verdict as illegal and unjust. Pressure has been mounting on the Pakistan government to stop Sheikh's release. Earlier, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken expressed deep concern over the Pakistan top court's verdict. In a telephonic conversation with his Pakistani counterpart, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, Blinken called for accountability. The United Nations has also called for greater accountability in Pakistan. Earlier, a lower court had convicted Sheikh and his accomplices of Pearl's murder. In fact, Omar Sheikh had been sentenced to death for killing the journalist. However, later, the Sindh High Court called for his release and the Pakistan Supreme Court upheld the High Court's order. Journal's South Asia Bureau Chief, when he was kidnapped and later beheaded in the Pakistani city of Karachi. This was in the year 2000, and the Al-Qaeda terror group. In Azaz, and 6 fighters at a checkpoint near the town of Alba, rebel fighters allied with Turkey.
جيت من سرمدة من نص سيارة مفخخة مصفوفة على يمين المحل شي 30 متر انفجرت وهذا الشيء اللي صار قدام عينكم. الله يشفي.
Government forces and the Kurdish-led forces who are considered terrorists by Ankara. The region has been witnessing significant Turkish troops and their proxies seized from Kurdish forces in 2018.
पूरी मानव जाति को हिलाकर रख दिया है। इन परिस्थितियों के बीच बजट में आत्मनिर्भरता का विजन भी है और हर नागरिक समावेश भी है। हम इस बजट में जिन सिद्धांतों को लेकर चले हैं के लिए नए अवसरों, नई संभावनाओं का विस्तार करना, युवाओं के निर्माण करना, मानव संसाधन को एक नया आयाम देना, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर निर्माण के लिए नए नए क्षेत्रों को विकसित करना, आधुनिकता की तरफ आगे बढ़ना, नए सुधार लाना। साथियों, नियमों आम लोगों के जीवन में ईज ऑफ लिविंग को बढ़ाने पर इस बजट रिस्पॉन्स आए। कोरोना के चलते कई एक्सपर्ट्स ये मानकर चल रहे थे सरकार आम नागरिकों पर बोझ बढ़ाएगी, लेकिन फिस्कल सस्टेनेबिलिटी के प्रति अपने दायित्वों को ध्यान में रखते हुए सरकार ने बजट साइज बढ़ाने पर जोर दिया। हमारी सरकार ने निरंतर प्रयास किया है कि बजट ट्रांसपेरेंट होना चाहिए। मुझे खुशी है कि आज अनेक विद्वानों ने इस बजट की ट्रांसपेरेंसी की सराहना की है। साथियों, भारत कोरोना की लड़ाई में स्थान पर हमेशा ही प्रोएक्टिव रहा है। चाहे वो कोरोना के काल में किए एक्टिव पर स्टेटस को पर भी अटके नहीं हैं और हमने इस बजट में भी प्रोएक्टिव बजट देख करके देश के सामने प्रोएक्टिव होने का संदेश। वेल्थ और वेलनेस दोनों ही तेज गति से बढ़ेंगे। जान भी जहान भी। इसमें एमएसएमई और बजट जिस तरह से हेल्थ केयर पर केंद्रित है, वो ये बजट देश के हर क्षेत्र में विकास यानी ऑल राउंड डेवलपमेंट की बात करता रहता है। खास तौर पर मुझे खुशी है कि इस बजट में दक्षिण के हमारे राज्य, पूर्वोत्तर के हमारे राज्य और उत्तर में लेह लद्दाख जैसे क्षेत्रों में विकास पर विशेष ध्यान दिया है। ये बजट भारत के कोस्टल स्टेट्स जैसे तमिलनाडु, केरल, पश्चिम बंगाल, इनको एक बिजनेस पावर हाउस बनाने की दिशा में एक बड़ा कदम उठाए। नॉर्थ ईस्ट के राज्य जैसे असम के अनएक्सप्लोर्ड पोटेंशियल को टैप करने में बजट बहुत बड़ी मदद करेगा। इस बजट में जिस तरह से रिसर्च एंड इनोवेशन इकोसिस्टम पर बल दिया गया है, जो प्रावधान किए गए हैं, उनसे हमारे युवाओं को ताकत मिलेगी। भारत उज्जवल भविष्य के लिए बहुत ठोस कदम रखेगा। साथियों, देश के सामान्य मानवी का, महिलाओं का जीवन आसान बनाने के लिए उनके स्वास्थ्य, स्वच्छता, पोषण, शुद्ध जल और अवसर पर इस बजट में विशेष बल दिया गया है। बजट में इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पर खर्च में अब जिसका बहुत बड़ा फायदा देश में ग्रोथ और जॉब क्रिएशन, रोजगार के लिए बहुत लाभ होगा। देश में एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर को मजबूती देने के लिए, किसानों की आय बढ़ाने के लिए इस पर बजट में बहुत जोर दिया गया है। कई प्रावधान किए गए हैं। एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर में किसानों को और ज्यादा ऋण मिल सकेगा। देश की मंडियों को यानी एपीएमसी को और मजबूत किया गया है। ये सब निर्णय ये दिखाते हैं कि इस बजट के दिल में गांव है, हमारे किसान है। एमएसएमई सेक्टर को गति देने के लिए से ज्यादा कर दिया गया है। साथ ही क्यों ये बजट लेकर आगे बढ़ा है, जिसमें देश के हर नागरिक की प्रगति शामिल है। ये बजट इस दशक की शुरुआत की एक मजबूत नींव रखने वाला बजट है। सभी देशवासियों को आत्मनिर्भर भारत के इस महत्वपूर्ण बजट के लिए मैं बहुत बहुत से एक बार वित्त मंत्री जी और उनकी टीम को बहुत बहुत अभिनंदन करता हूं, धन्यवाद करता हूं।
That was Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi delivering his speech shortly after the unveiling of Budget 2021. As we all heard what the Prime Minister had to say, this is not a reactive, instead it is a proactive budget which has emphasized tremendously on healthcare and inflation. Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has presented India's first full-fledged pandemic budget. Includes around 35,000 crores for India's more India-made vaccines are in the pipeline. Around 2,200 crores have also been allocated to tackle air pollution in major urban centres. The Finance Minister announced a new public health scheme, Atmanirbhar Health Yojana, with an outlay of rupees 65,000 crores. Besides this, the government will also set up 15 health
systems, strengthen existing national institutions, and create